"You're overreacting," Mom screamed after my sister broke my arm with a hammer. "It's just a bruise. Stop making a scene." But when my doctor saw the x-ray, everything changed. You know that sound? The one in movies when a bone breaks? That sickening wet crack that makes you physically recoil? It's a sound you assume is just Hollywood exaggeration. I'm here to tell you it's not. If anything, they tone it down. The actual sound is intimate. It's a sound that happens inside you, a deep, resonant snap that you feel in your teeth and behind your eyes before the pain even registers. I was lying on the cold, unforgiving hardwood of our living room floor. My arm was bent at an angle that defied basic anatomy, a grotesque new joint where there shouldn't be one. Swelling was already puffing up the skin, distorting my wrist into something alien. And standing over me, breathing hard like she'd just run a marathon, was my older sister, Samantha. In her hand, held loosely at her side, was the claw hammer from my dad's old toolbox. Her face wasn't apologetic. It wasn't scared. It was flushed with the pure, ugly satisfaction of victory. The metallic tang of blood, my blood, mingled with the cloying lemon scent of the floor cleaner Mom insisted on using. In the sudden, deafening silence, the only sounds were the frantic ticking of the cheap plastic wall clock and my own ragged, shallow breaths. That's when I heard my mother's voice float across the room. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a gasp of horror. It was calm, annoyed even, bored. "Ava, for God's sake, stop overreacting." I blinked, certain the shock had made me mishear her. My mouth opened, a silent plea, but my lungs wouldn't work. I turned my head, the movement sending a fresh jolt of agony up my arm, and stared at her. She was standing by the doorway to the kitchen, arms crossed over her chest, a dish towel still slung over her shoulder. She was just watching, waiting for the drama to be over. "It's just a bruise," she sighed, shaking her head with the practiced weariness of a woman who had simply had enough of my theatrics. "Siblings fight. It's normal. Get up." Samantha let out a little smirk. The hammer swung slightly as she shifted her weight, as if she just used it to hang a picture instead of shatter my ulna. The throbbing in my arm was a brutal drum beat, but through the fog of pain, one thought cut through with chilling clarity. This was not normal. This was not a sibling fight. This was an assault. I had just been attacked in my own home by the person who had made my life a living hell for years, and the one person on this earth whose literal job it was to protect me was telling me to walk it off. My mind splintered. One part of me wanted to unleash a primal scream, to curse her for her coldness, to demand she really look, at what her precious golden child had done. Another, smaller part wanted to obey, to crawl into a dark corner and disappear, just like I always did. But then, a third voice emerged. It was a whisper I'd never heard before, quiet but forged from steel. "This is it. This is the last time. The last time they hurt you and tell you it's not real. The last time they get to decide the limits of your pain. The last time you let their definition of normal erase you." My arm felt like it was on fire, each heartbeat a fresh wave of torture, but somewhere beneath the terror and the profound, soul-crushing betrayal, a tiny spark ignited. It wasn't hope, not yet. Hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. It was something harder, something sharper. It was the beginning of an idea, the beginning of a plan. I tried to push myself up with my good arm, a strangled gasp escaping my lips as the broken bones ground together. Samantha just muttered, "Drama queen," and sauntered into the kitchen. My mother followed her, leaving me on the floor like a forgotten coat. Their voices faded into a low murmur, the clink of glasses, the running of a faucet. They were getting a drink. Lying there, I focused on breathing. In, out, and I made myself a silent, solemn vow. This moment, this pain, this floor, this wasn't the end. This was the day everything changed. To understand how a hammer became a casual tool for family arguments, you have to understand the ecosystem of our house. We lived in a small town in Ohio where Sunday church attendance and the state of your front lawn were the primary metrics of your worth. From the outside, we were perfect. The 2-story house with the tidy flower beds, the white picket fence Mom repainted every spring. We were the picture of a strong family that had persevered after my father's sudden death when I was 8. But inside that picture was a lie. My father's death didn't bring us closer. It created a power vacuum that my mother, Carol, filled with an iron-fisted obsession with appearances. The family name was sacrosanct. Any problem, any crack in the facade was to be plastered over and painted white. Samantha, 3 years my senior, thrived in this environment. She was the golden child, the sun around which our small family orbited. Her B-plus papers were framed on the fridge. My straight-A report cards were met with a distracted, "That's nice, dear." She was popular, pretty, and possessed a cruel intelligence she learned to weaponize early on. She figured out that as long as the damage wasn't visible to the outside world, she had carte blanche. It started small. My toys would go missing, only to turn up broken in the back of her closet. She'd shove me in the hallway, hard enough to leave a blooming purple bruise on my hip, and if I cried out, Mom would yell from the other room, "Girls, stop that roughhousing." That phrase, roughhousing, siblings, fight, it's normal, became the soundtrack to my childhood. It was a magic incantation that absolved Samantha of all guilt and painted me as the oversensitive troublemaker. By high school, her tactics evolved. She was the queen bee, and I was her convenient in-house target. She'd borrow my favorite sweater for a party and return it with a cigarette burn in the sleeve. When I confronted her, she'd laugh. Relax, it's just a sweater. God, you're so dramatic. Mom would back her up. Ava, don't make a fuss. It was an accident. One time, she spread a vicious rumor that I'd cheated on a history midterm, just because a boy she liked had asked me for help with the homework. When I came home in tears after being called to the principal's office, she didn't even deny it. She just leaned against my doorway, examining her nails, and said, well, maybe you shouldn't have been so obvious about trying to get his attention. My mother's response? You need to learn not to be so naive, Ava, and fighting over boys is so trashy. The physical side escalated too. A shove down the last 2 stairs that left me with a sprained ankle I had to limp on for a week. She's so clumsy, Samantha told everyone. A slap to the back of my head when I changed the TV channel. Each time, I was the one told to be less sensitive, to stop provoking her, to understand that Samantha just has a temper. I learned to be quiet. I learned to be invisible. I poured everything into my studies and my part-time job shelving books at the town library. That job was my sanctuary. The quiet stacks, the smell of old paper, and the small paycheck that was mine and mine alone. That money was more than currency. It was my escape fund. My ticket to a college far, far away, where nobody knew my name or my family's pristine reputation. But as high school graduation loomed, the walls started closing in. Mom began dropping hints. Who will help me with the garden if you're gone? You know, the community college has a perfectly good business program. Samantha was more direct. You really think you can afford to live on your own? You can't even decide what to eat for breakfast without panicking. They were a team, a 2-person demolition crew aimed at my future. They planned my life in conversations that I wasn't a part of, mapping out a future where I'd stay home, work at the local department store, and continue to be their built-in maid and emotional punching bag. The tension in the house in the weeks before the hammer incident was thick enough to choke on. Samantha had planned a post-graduation trip to Miami with her friends, a trip she had no money for. She knew about my college fund. I kept my bank book in my desk drawer, and I was meticulous about tracking every dollar. It was the one thing in my life I had complete control over. One afternoon, she cornered me in the kitchen. I saw your bank statement, she said, casual as anything. You've got over $3,000 in there. You can spare $1,000 for my trip. I'll pay you back. We both knew that was a lie. For the first time, a real, solid no left my lips. Not an excuse, not a justification, just no. Her face for a split second was a mask of pure fury. It was the look of a tyrant whose favorite subject had just refused to bow. She didn't argue. She just turned and walked away, and the silence that followed was more threatening than any shout. That night at dinner, she played her hand. In front of Mom, she painted me as selfish and greedy. Family is supposed to help each other, she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. Mom looked at me, her face a familiar portrait of disappointment. She's your sister, Ava. Money isn't everything. It's for my tuition, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's for my future. The argument was dropped, but the war had begun. The next day, I came home to find my bedroom door pried open and my desk rifled through. The lock was broken. Nothing was gone, but the message was clear. No space was mine, no boundary was respected. 2 nights later, it came to a head. We were in the kitchen. I was making a sandwich, and she started in on me, mocking my college plans, calling me a pathetic bookworm who would be eaten alive in the real world. You're just scared I'm going to leave and you'll have no one to push around anymore, I shot back, my voice shaking with a sudden, reckless bravery. That's when her smile vanished. Maybe you need to be reminded of your place, she hissed, stepping so close I could feel the heat coming off her. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep. I ripped it away. Don't touch me. Her eyes scanned the counter and landed on the hammer Mom had left out after trying to fix a wobbly chair leg. She picked it up. The sheer casualness of the act made my blood run cold. She swung it, a playful arc that whistled past my ear, and laughed at the way I flinched. You're insane, I breathed, backing away. Put it down. Maybe, she said, her eyes glittering with something truly unhinged. You need to learn some respect. And then she brought it down on my arm. The snap. The pain. My mother's voice telling me to stop overreacting. Her concern wasn't for my bone, but for the potential mess, the disruption to her carefully curated peace. As I lay on my bed that night, my shattered arm cradled against my chest, the pain a constant, throbbing reminder, I understood. They weren't just unwilling to protect me. They were active participants in my destruction. And if I didn't get out, one day they were going to erase me completely. The sun rose the next morning, casting long shadows across my room. Something inside me had hardened overnight. The fear was still there, a cold pit in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a chilling, resolute clarity. I was done. Getting out of that house was like planning a prison break. I waited until I heard the front door close, signaling that Mom and Samantha had left for the day. Mom to her part-time job at the town hall, Samantha to go shopping with the friends she was still trying to squeeze money from. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. Dressing with one hand was a clumsy, agonizing process. I pulled on a baggy sweatshirt to hide the grotesque swelling of my arm and walked the 1.5 miles to the bus stop, every step jarring the broken bones. The bus ride to the urgent care clinic on the other side of town felt like an eternity. I sat hunched over, cradling my arm, flinching every time the bus hit a pothole. Inside the sterile, fluorescent-lit clinic, I filled out the paperwork with my good hand, my writing a shaky scrawl. I wrote down that I'd fallen down the stairs. It was the lie my mother had effectively programmed into me. Don't air our dirty laundry. Don't make a scene. When the nurse, a kind-faced woman named Maria, called my name, my voice was a reedy whisper. She took one look at the unnatural angle of my arm as she helped me out of my sweatshirt, and her cheerful demeanor vanished. Her eyes, full of a professional sympathy that felt more genuine than anything I'd received from my own mother, met mine. "Honey," she said, her voice soft but firm. "This is not from a fall." It was such a simple statement, but it cracked the dam I had built inside myself. The lie crumbled. I just stared at the linoleum floor, a single, hot tear tracing a path down my cheek. I didn't have to say a word. She knew. The doctor, a tall man named Dr. Evans with a calm, serious face, came in. He gently examined the injury, his touch surprisingly delicate. He didn't press for details, just said, "We're going to get an x-ray of this, okay?" When he returned with the films and clipped them onto the light box, the image was horrifyingly clear. The two bones in my forearm, the radius and the ulna, weren't just cracked. One had a clean transverse fracture, a perfect line straight through. It was the kind of break, he explained, that comes from a significant, direct impact. A fall might break a wrist, but this was different. He turned to me, his gaze direct and unwavering. "Ava, I have to ask you a question, and it's very important you answer me honestly. Are you safe at home?" The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Saying no felt like stepping off a cliff. It would set in motion a chain of events I couldn't control. But lying felt like tying the rope around my own neck. The words spilled out, a torrent of pain and fear I'd held back for a decade. I told him everything. About Samantha, the years of escalating abuse, my mother's denial, the fight over the money, the hammer. Dr. Evans listened without a single interruption. When I was finished, my voice raw and hoarse, he nodded slowly. "Ava, by law, I am a mandatory reporter. This is a case of suspected domestic assault. I have to report this to the police and to Child Protective Services." Panic seized me. The police? At our house? I pictured my mother's face, contorted with rage, not at Samantha, but at me, for breaking the cardinal rule. You don't tell outsiders. Sensing my terror, Dr. Evans said, "This is not to punish you. This is to protect you. You are 18, but since this has been an ongoing pattern while you were a minor, CPS will still be involved with your mother." He then handed me a brochure for a local women's shelter and domestic violence support center. He wrote down a name, Karen, and a direct phone number. They can help you with a safety plan, a restraining order, a place to go. You do not have to go back there. They fitted my arm into a heavy, temporary cast, the plaster cool against my hot skin, and gave me a prescription for painkillers. As I walked out of the clinic, the bright afternoon sun felt alien. The world looked the same, but I was different. A choice had been made for me, and by me. Someone else knew the truth. The secret was no longer mine to carry alone. That night, locked in my room, I began my real work. The pain in my arm was a dull, constant throb, but my mind was laser-focused. I took out my phone. With my good hand, I started documenting. I took pictures of my casted arm from every angle. I photographed the deep purple and yellow bruises that were already forming. I took a picture of the broken lock on my bedroom door. I even found the hammer, which Samantha had carelessly tossed back into the toolbox in the garage, and took a picture of it, noting a small chip in the wood that matched a gouge on the kitchen floor. Then I went digital. I scrolled through years of text messages, screenshotting every conversation where Samantha had been threatening, every time my mother had dismissed my pleas for help. I found an old audio recording app on my phone and started leaving it on in my pocket whenever I was near them. The snippets I caught were chillingly mundane. Samantha mocking my cast. "Guess you won't be writing any of your stupid poems for a while." My mother's voice, sharp and cold. "I hope you're happy now, Ava. Just think of the trouble you're causing." Every photo, every screenshot, every audio file was a brick. I was building a fortress of evidence around myself. I called the number Dr. Evans had given me. A calm, steady voice answered. "Karen." I told her my story, and for the first time, I was met not with doubt or judgment, but with practical, life-saving advice. She asked if I had anywhere safe to go, a friend or relative not under my mother's influence. One person came to mind, Ms. Thompson, my senior year English teacher. She was a no-nonsense woman who had retired the year before. She'd once pulled me aside after class, noticing the perpetual sadness in my eyes, and told me, "Ava, if you ever need a safe place to land, my door is always open." I'd thought it was just a kind platitude. Now it felt like a lifeline. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. When I explained what had happened, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said, her voice filled with a quiet fury, "I knew it. I always suspected something was wrong in that house. When can I come get you?" We made a plan. 2 days later, while Mom and Samantha were at a doctor's appointment for Samantha's seasonal allergies, The irony was not lost on me. Thompson would pull up a block away from my house at exactly 2 p.m. The next 48 hours were the most terrifying of my life. I moved through the house like a ghost, packing a single backpack with my most important possessions. My birth certificate, social security card, the bank book for my escape fund, my laptop, a few changes of clothes, and a small, worn copy of Jane Eyre Miss Thompson had given me. Everything else, I had to leave behind. At 1:55 p.m. on the day of my escape, I stood in my room for the last time. The house was silent. I slipped out the back door, my heart hammering against my ribs, and walked, not ran, down the street. When I saw her sensible gray sedan waiting, a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. I got in, tossed my backpack in the back, and didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I was afraid I'd turn to stone. Miss Thompson's house was a small, cozy bungalow filled with books and the smell of chamomile tea. She showed me to a small guest room. It was simple, but the door had a lock that worked. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without fear. The call from my mother came the next morning. Her voice was a tightly controlled fury. "Where are you? You have caused so much trouble." A police officer came to the door, Ava. "A police officer! Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" "I'm safe," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Safe? You were always safe! You need to come home right now and tell them this was all a huge misunderstanding." "No," I said. "I'm not coming home," and I hung up. The weeks that followed were a blur of action. With Karen's help, I filed for a temporary restraining order against Samantha. The evidence I'd collected, the doctor's report, the photos, the audio clips, made it a swift process. A court date was set. The family, of course, imploded. My mother began a smear campaign, calling relatives to tell them I was mentally unstable, a pathological liar who had run away with an older woman. And that's when I received the invitation. It was for my grandmother's 75th birthday party, a huge family gathering at my aunt's house. My first instinct was to throw it away. But then Miss Thompson looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "Or," she said, "this could be your opportunity. They're telling their story. Maybe it's time you told yours." I arrived at my Aunt Carol's house feeling like a soldier walking into battle. I had my folder of evidence tucked into my purse. The moment I walked in, the room went quiet. All eyes were on me and my bright blue cast. My mother shot me a look of pure venom. Samantha, holding court with a group of cousins, just smirked. The evening was a masterclass in passive aggression. Relatives gave me wide berth. My mother and sister loudly discussed my recent troubles and my cry for attention, always just loud enough for me to hear. Then, during dessert, Samantha decided to go for the kill. She stood up, clinking a spoon against her glass for attention. "I just want to say something," she began, her voice oozing with fake concern. "I know a lot of you are worried about my little sister, Ava. It's been so hard watching her struggle. She's been confused lately. She had a little accident and she's blown it way out of proportion, and we just want her to know that when she's ready to stop all this drama and come home, we'll be waiting with open arms." She even mimed a clumsy swing, as if tripping over air. "Silly me," a few people tittered nervously. That was it. That was my moment. I stood up slowly. "I have something to add to that story." I walked to the head of the table where my uncle was sitting and placed my folder down. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I spoke in a calm, clear voice. "Samantha is right. There was an accident," I said, pulling out the first 8x10 glossy photo of my grotesquely swollen and bruised arm. I handed it to my aunt. A gasp rippled through the room. "This was the little accident caused by this." I passed around the photo of the hammer. My mother stood up. "Ava, this is not the time or the place." "This is the only time and place," I interrupted, my voice gaining strength. I pulled out my phone and played one of the audio clips. Samantha's voice, clear as day, sneering, "Guess you won't be writing any of your stupid poems for a while." Followed by my mother's, "I hope you're happy now, Ava. Just think of the trouble you're causing." The room was utterly silent. Samantha's face had gone from smug to chalk white. For 15 years, I continued, my eyes scanning the faces of my family, people who had watched me grow up. I was told that my sister's abuse was normal sibling rivalry. When she broke my arm with this hammer because I wouldn't give her my college savings, I was told I was overreacting. I held up a copy of Dr. Evans's official report, the words non-accidental trauma and blunt force injury clearly visible. This is the report that was filed with the police. The police that my mother is so humiliated by. My aunt, the host, stammered, "We shouldn't air dirty laundry." "The dirty laundry," I said, looking directly at my mother, "is a child who was physically and emotionally abused while you stood by and protected the abuser to protect your reputation. The secret is the dirt. The truth is just the truth." I looked at Samantha, whose eyes were darting around the room looking for an ally and finding none. "Do you deny it?" I asked her, my voice ringing in the silence. "Do you deny you hit me with a hammer?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. That silence was her confession. It was all the confirmation anyone needed. A cousin finally broke the spell. "My God, Carol," he said to my mother, "is this true?" My mother just sank back into her chair, her face ashen. Samantha, with a choked sob that sounded more like rage than remorse, grabbed her purse and fled the house. My mother, after a moment's hesitation, followed her. The facade hadn't just cracked. I had taken a sledgehammer to it. After they left, a few relatives came over to me, their faces etched with shame and regret. They mumbled apologies, asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. The validation was dizzying, but it was also hollow. Where had they been for the last 15 years? Still, as Ms. Thompson drove me home that night, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. But it was a clean kind of empty. The space that had been filled with secrets and fear was now, for the first time, ready to be filled with something new. Something of my own. The aftermath of that dinner was seismic. The family didn't just split into factions. It shattered. My mother and Samantha became pariahs, their carefully constructed image of perfection lying in ruins. Some relatives cut them off completely. Others offered weak, placating support that only highlighted their isolation. The legal process moved forward with a grim inevitability. Samantha was formally charged with assault. Given that I was now living elsewhere and she had no prior record, the lawyer Karen helped me find said it would likely end in a plea deal. Probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a permanent restraining order. It wasn't prison, but it was a public, legal brand of shame she could never escape. For me, leaving town for college that fall wasn't just an escape, it was a rebirth. I moved into a tiny dorm room 3 states away. A cinderblock cell that felt more like a palace than the bedroom I'd grown up in. For the first time, I was defined not by my relationship to Samantha and my mother, but simply as Ava. I threw myself into my studies with a ferocity that surprised even me. I'd chosen to major in psychology, driven by a desperate need to understand the dynamics that had shaped and nearly broken me. I wanted to put names to the shadows I'd lived with. Narcissistic personality disorder, enmeshment, the scapegoat/golden child dynamic. Every textbook, every lecture was a revelation. It wasn't just my family, it was a pattern. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't overreacting. I was a survivor of a classic, textbook case of familial abuse. The healing, however, wasn't a straight line. It was messy and unpredictable. I'd be fine for weeks, and then a loud noise in the hallway would send a jolt of adrenaline through me, my body bracing for a blow that wasn't coming. I struggled with trust. Friendships felt precarious, and the idea of a romantic relationship was terrifying. How could you let someone in when your entire life had taught you that intimacy was a weapon? I found my footing at the University Counseling Center. My first therapy sessions were halting and difficult. I spent the first 2 appointments just talking about my classes, unable to broach the real reason I was there. But my therapist, a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, was patient. She created a space so safe that I finally felt able to unpack the years of pain. She taught me about complex PTSD. She gave me tools, grounding techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy, to manage the anxiety and the flashbacks. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to rebuild my sense of self from the ground up. I joined the university's literary magazine, rediscovering my love for poetry that Samantha had so cruelly mocked. I made friends, a small, tight-knit group of fellow outsiders who valued kindness and authenticity above all else. They knew a vague version of my story, and they didn't press for details. They just accepted me, cast and all. It took months for the bone to fully heal. My part-time job at the university library was my anchor. The quiet order of the stacks, the methodical work of shelving books, soothed the chaos that still sometimes churned inside me. The money I earned, combined with scholarships I fought tooth and nail for, meant I was completely financially independent. I would never have to ask anyone for anything again. That independence was the most precious thing I owned. By my junior year, I was recommended for a coveted internship at a local nonprofit that provided counseling and legal aid to victims of domestic violence, the very kind of place that had saved me. It was like coming full circle. I started by answering phones and doing paperwork, but my empathy and understanding, born from experience, didn't go unnoticed. I was soon trained as a peer counselor, sitting with women and men who were in the exact place I had been just a few years before, terrified, confused, and desperate for someone to believe them. In their stories, I heard the echoes of my own, the gaslighting, the isolation, the way abuse can be disguised as love. And in sharing parts of my own journey, I saw a flicker of hope in their eyes. It was the most meaningful work I had ever done. It solidified my goal. I would get my master's in social work. I would become a licensed therapist. I would spend my life giving others the help I so desperately needed. My success was a quiet, steady thing, built day by day. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. News of it trickled back to my hometown via the family grapevine. An aunt who had reached out to apologize sent me a check for my birthday, which I politely returned. A cousin messaged me on social media to say congratulations on making the dean's list. I received these overtures with a detached civility. I was grateful for their change of heart, but the trust was gone forever. They were characters from a book I had already finished reading. My mother sent a Christmas card that first year. Inside, she'd written, "Hoping you are well." There was no apology, no acknowledgement, no love. It was the message of a stranger. I didn't reply. Samantha, I heard, had completed her anger management courses. She had a string of short-lived jobs in retail and customer service, but her inability to handle criticism or take responsibility meant she never lasted anywhere long. She was, a cousin told me, living back at home with Mom. As I prepared for graduation, I moved into my first real apartment. It was a small one-bedroom with big windows that let in the morning light. I painted the walls a calming shade of sage green and filled it with secondhand furniture I lovingly restored myself. Every bookshelf I built, every plant I potted was an act of creation in a life that had once been defined by destruction. This small space was my kingdom, a sanctuary I had built not by escaping, but by running toward a future of my own design. The greatest revenge, I was learning, wasn't seeing them fail. It was my own relentless, unapologetic success. It was the quiet, profound peace of a life lived on my own terms. 5 years after I walked out of that house with nothing but a backpack and a broken arm, I was a different person living in a different universe. I had my master's degree and was a licensed clinical social worker at the same center where I had once interned. I wasn't just a peer counselor anymore. I was leading group therapy sessions and managing my own caseload. My life had a rhythm, a purpose. The ghosts of my past were no longer constant companions. They were distant echoes, faint and infrequent. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, an email landed in my inbox that made my blood run cold. The subject line was innocuous, job inquiry. The sender's name was Samantha. My first impulse was to delete it and block her email address. But a morbid curiosity, mingled with a new, hard-won confidence, made me open it. The message was brief and sickeningly polite, written in a corporate jargon she must have picked up from one of her failed jobs. Dear Ava, it read, I hope this message finds you well. I was informed by Aunt Carol that you are in a management position at the Northwood Community Counseling Center. I was reviewing your center's career page and saw an opening for a client relations coordinator. With my extensive background in customer service, I believe my skills would be a valuable asset to your team. I have attached my resume for your consideration. Look forward to hearing from you. Best, Samantha. I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. Did she think I had forgotten? Did she think that 5 years in a court-mandated anger management class had wiped the slate clean? Or worse, did she genuinely believe that she was the victim, and that this was her way of extending an olive branch that I, in my professional capacity, would be obligated to accept? I thought about all the things I could say. I could forward the email to HR with a note about her criminal record. I could write a scathing reply detailing every reason she was uniquely unqualified to work with vulnerable people. Instead, I took a deep breath, centered myself, and wrote back a single, simple sentence. This workplace is a safe space for survivors. You are not welcome here. I signed my name, my professional title listed neatly below it, and hit send without a second thought. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't vengeful. It was a statement of fact. A boundary, clean and absolute. Her reply came within minutes, not by email, but as a text from an unknown number. The professional veneer had vanished. Who the hell do you think you are? After all these years, you're still holding a grudge? You ruined my life. You turned the whole family against me, and now you're trying to stop me from getting a job? You're the manipulative one. You're the monster. I read the message, and for the first time in my life, her words had no power over me. They were just the desperate, flailing tantrum of a bully who had lost her target. I didn't feel anger or fear. I felt a profound sense of pity, and then nothing. I deleted the text, blocked the number, and went back to work. The final, definitive end came about a month later. I was in the grocery store on a Saturday morning, debating between almond milk and oat milk, when I felt a presence beside me. I looked up and there she was. Samantha. She looked older, harder. The arrogant confidence she used to wear like a second skin was gone, replaced by a brittle, defensive tension around her eyes and mouth. We locked eyes, and in that moment, the entire grocery aisle seemed to fall away. Ava, she said, her voice strained. She opened her mouth as if to say more, and I saw a flicker of something in her expression. A convoluted mix of resentment and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of regret. But it didn't matter anymore. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her confession or her remorse. Waiting for any of those things would mean she still had a hold on me. I looked at her, the woman who had broken my bones and tried to break my spirit, and I gave her a small, polite, and completely empty smile. The kind of smile you give a stranger in a crowded elevator. Excuse me, I said, reaching past her for the oat milk. And then I turned and walked away. I didn't hurry. I didn't look back. I just continued with my shopping, my heart beating a calm, steady rhythm. The war was over. Not because I had won, but because I had simply refused to fight anymore. I had built a life so full of light that her darkness couldn't touch it. Looking back, I see my life in two distinct parts, before and after the hammer. The before was a grayscale world of fear, silence, and walking on eggshells. The after is a world I painted myself, in vibrant, brilliant color. My relationship with my mother never recovered. I accept that she made her choice long ago, and that choice was not me. I don't hate her. I simply hold her in a place of profound and sorrowful distance. My story isn't about revenge. My success is not for them. It's for the girl who lay on the cold hardwood floor, believing her pain didn't matter. It's proof to her, every single day, that she was wrong. Her pain mattered. She mattered. Closure, I've learned, isn't something someone else gives you. It's not an apology or a courtroom verdict. It's the moment you realize that your future is more important than your past. It's the quiet peace you find when you stop waiting for the people who hurt you to see your worth, and you finally, truly, see it for yourself. It's the freedom in knowing that you will never, ever again let someone else tell you that you are overreacting.